Hi, this is Lily. I'm the host of Master Leadership Podcast, and we're recording here from Glow Podcast Row event in New York City. And we have the pleasure of having Dr. Rosenna Bakari with us. How are you?
I am doing well, Lily. I'm so excited to talk with you this morning.
Now, we've had great talks already.
Yes, we have.
This is our
I'm looking
second
forward
day,
to it.
and you and I connected, and it was fantastic. Now, tell us a bit about yourself and about your company.
So, I am the founding director of Talking Trees, which is an empowerment organization for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. I'm going to expand on that a little bit because oftentimes because people aren't used to this conversation, they automatically think of children. I don't work with children at all. I work with adults who have been violated during their childhood before the age of 18. So most of the adults have never addressed those issues of violation. So, in fact, the average adult survivor began dealing with their issues in their 40s. So most of us spend 20, 30, 40 years living in silence before ever addressing those issues. So Talking Trees is an empowerment organization that help adult survivors sort of provide information about the healing journey, support about the healing journey. I founded the organization in 2010 when I started living after I started living openly as an incest survivor. So, and realized that as a researcher, a psychologist, that I had resources that other people did not have. And if this journey was so arduous, so difficult, so complex for me, I couldn't imagine how much more difficult it was for other survivors. And at the time, there were 40 million survivors. Now it's closer to 60 million survivors. So there's a lot of information that people don't have about the journey that I thought was critical, and I wanted to design a space for people to have access to information, have support that affirmed and validated their experiences, and gave them encouragement and inspiration to take on such an arduous journey, especially when you talk about dropping the secret and finding your voice. And it just wasn't a lot of information for people to have.
And it's really important and necessary information for people to have, but also what kind of therapeutics do you offer therapeutic services? And if people need it, and there are a lot,
Yeah.
how can they connect with you?
So my organization is talkingtreesurvivors.com. And if you go to that page, you'll find links to the Facebook support page that I also created in 2010. The reason it's a Facebook organization is because people was like, why are you on Facebook? Because for whatever it's worth, bad or good, Facebook is one of the few places that people can access from all over the world.
And they can
And
do it
so,
anonymously too,
and they can do it anonymously.
and feel
Yeah,
safe.
sort of. They can
Right.
create an identity to do it. But many websites people can't access from outside of the country. So a third of our constituents are outside of the United States, and that's important. So their access to Talking Trees is through Facebook. I've been writing daily, every single day, no matter where I am in the world. I find time to give voice to survivors, and that's been really critical and really important. So that's the easiest way to have access to information. I create videos. I've written books. My latest, in fact, in 2010, in 2018 rather, I finally published after writing for Talking Trees for 8 years. I finally put together my own narrative of my own experiences of living in silence for 40 years. So there are lots of resources that people can have access to once they reach talkingtreesurvivors.com.
So there are two more questions that just come up for me. But let's talk about your book. I have your book, Too Much Love Is Not Enough. Wonderful. Thank you for the copy. I'm so excited. I can't wait to read it. So tell us about the book. It's about your life, your journey.
Right. So, as I said, I started writing daily, and there were some issues that really stood out for me that I knew adult survivors didn't understand. So, as a researcher, when I started my own journey and I'm going to the research articles, the information is so helpful for me to get me out of this trigger, post-traumatic stress experience that
Right,
I'm
and you,
that
and
I'm
you have the
having.
skill sets for that. You know how to do that,
Right.
and it's hard.
And it's still hard.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had resources, I had knowledge, I had experience. And so when I started reading, some things really popped out for me that sort of resets, like if your shoulder is out of place and you have to, it hurts, right? But it
Right.
goes back in place and it's
Right.
fine once it gets back in place. So some things really stood out for me. So this part of the pain for a survivor is this feeling of isolation, weird, you're the only one that these things happen to, because it's easy to believe that if you've never spoken about it,
That's right.
you don't get this information. So I'm reading these journals, and the first thing I realized, for example, is that, oh my gosh, the average number of violators that people have before they turn 18 is 3. Most survivors don't know that. So you're walking around thinking, oh my God, I'm the only person stupid enough, because this is the voice you have in your head because you've never had a conversation, so you carry all this with you. So they don't know that the average number of violators are 3. How many violators did I have? 3. I'm like, oh my
too.
God. Right.
Me too.
But
That's
you
right.
don't, right? So I'm like, that is
I
profound.
didn't know that until now.
So imagine the ease that comes with that. Like, oh my gosh, I did not know that most survivors of childhood sexual abuse were abused by family members. I did not know that until I started to research. Most survivors don't know that. So you have all these feelings of weirdness and oddness. You don't know that only 15% of children who are only 15% of children who are sexually abused are identified in childhood. Only 15%.
Right.
So the majority of us carry this secret and go into adulthood without anyone even saying as much as, I'm sorry this happened to you. That's a heavy piece that we carry. And so it was important to find ways to disseminate this information. Most adult survivors, because we are actually incest survivors, do not know or don't have a picture or a model for things like love, genuine love, and being able to live without feeling fear
And
or
trust.
and trust and not hiding. Like, you think it's normal not to trust people. You think it's
Right.
normal,
You think that's okay. You think that's good to
right?
not trust.
You think it's normal to not have boundaries. Right. So it's all these weird
don't even
things
know what
going on.
boundaries
You don't even
are.
know what boundaries are.
Right.
So all of these
Right.
strange things happening. So I began to really, that's why it was important to write daily, because it's too much to take in at once. So you just give a little bit of bites at a
Right.
time, Do you know that all children are entitled to love and affirmation without having to be a human sacrifice for someone's pleasure, right? That should not happen. Do you know, so you have to say that like 100 times before survivors even hear it, right? Because all these are normal experiences when you've never been given otherwise.
Right. Right.
So after writing for 8 years and sorting through all of that for survivors as well as for myself, I felt like it was really time to narrate my own journey of what silence has been and what it's looked like and how I got to my own journey of living openly.
Well, I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
Now, why talking trees? I think that's such an amazing, I guess, it's a name for your company. But
Thank
why did
you.
you choose talking trees?
So when I started living openly, and
And what does that mean?
thanks, yeah. So the message for me was that you have to drop the secret, because I realized that the secret was what was really absorbing and keeping the pain in play for me. And so living openly, it was the message that I got. You have to live it openly, and that's what I said. Well, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means.
So you were in stillness and
So-
you heard you gotta
yes.
live openly.
You have to drop
Rosenna.
the secret. Yes, exactly. Like, you have to drop the secret. And I wouldn't even call it stillness. Actually, I was in a post-traumatic stress trigger. And like, the only way out of this is to live openly.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, what does that mean? So that was around 2007. So between 2007 and 10, I was trying to figure out what does living openly mean, and so that's when I was doing all the research and finding words and blah blah blah. So what it came to mean was I understood was it just means you drop the secret, like you stop living your life around this secret, and so the whole book is really about tries to show what silence looks like, right? What are the things that you're doing consciously and unconsciously to maintain this secret? So, for example, when you're an incest survivor, this is your initiation into sexuality. But we don't think
into love.
into love, into
Right.
sexuality.
Into what you think is love, right?
Right. Like that's profound.
Right.
That is profound. But we don't think about that because it's just your experience. But you don't at a party go, oh yeah, everybody's talking about their first time. Like you have to narrate that completely different. You have to circumvent.
And you become good at that, don't you?
You become really
You
good
real
at that.
Yeah.
You don't even realize. You don't even realize the questions you avoid. You don't even realize that you don't go on to the basement because that's where bad things happen, or you don't do certain things, or you don't sleep with the lights off, or you don't. It just becomes how life is for you. You don't make the dots and make the connections.
And the toll it has on your body.
And the toll that it takes on your body and your mind. So to get to your question, when I started living openly and having to explore all of these experiences, I did not have words. And it's interesting now that we can sit here and I can articulate these concepts to you now with words, because I couldn't do that in 2007 or 2008. So what I did, because I was already a poet and I was writing, and I'm like, can I write about it? And I couldn't write about it. I couldn't formulate the ideas. It was just a big blog in your head of feelings and experiences that you don't know how to get out of your head and explain to people. Finally, one of the first pieces that I wrote about in this attempt to outline this experience that I was having, I wrote this poem called Talking Trees, because I could only write about it in abstract terms. And so I wrote about how men forage and go in the forest and do whatever they want to the trees. They climb on the trees. They cut them down for wood. They throw things at them. They swing at that. They do whatever they want in this forest full of trees, and they never stop to even acknowledge that it's a tree.
But it's a living being or
it's
entity.
a living entity, right?
Yeah.
And so, Talking Trees is a poem about what trees would say if they had a voice. And so that was the closest I could come to trying to describe what I was feeling inside, or what this experience was that I was trying to get at living openly. And so in 2010, when I created the organization, I just called it Talking Trees, and the first play that I produced about the experience of living in silence.
I didn't know this. What?
Yeah.
You produced a play too.
I produced a play, and I produced a play called Talking Trees, and it's about the experience of living in silence and what that looks like, and what the survivor is dealing with internally as a survivor, and how different life looks, or how different life feels, even though it may look similar to other people.
And how did that impact the audience?
It's interesting. This is the 10th year. April 15th is the 10th year anniversary of Talking Trees. I'm actually producing the play for the third time. I did it in 2010, 2015, and then in 2020. This is the 10th year anniversary. And I'm going to be doing it in Colorado Springs for Safe Space Day, which is the day that we celebrate the resilience of survivors.
And that's a great word, resilience.
Thank you. Yeah. Yep. And so Talking Trees is interesting because the audience is intense, and there are no violent scenes. There are no violent scenes at all. It's very much dialogue. It's not a linear play of that this is what happened and this is the outcome. It's very much like, I don't know if you remember, for Color Girls, who consider suicide when a rainbow is enough, is very much modeled after that. That's sort of the template for it. So just people talking about their experiences and what it's like having dinner with violators at the table, buying gifts for someone who violated
they're
you.
on their
You know,
family.
that, yeah, and that what goes on in your head and all the ways that you have to formulate the world and in life to maintain and hold this secret.
The energy it
The
takes.
energy that it takes and how much it hides your own authenticity,
And you think that's normal.
and you think it's normal. And it's interesting, one of the most profound things when I started living openly and having conversations with people and dropped this secret, and people started, when I was talking to people, like, I explain to me how you buy gift for someone who violate, like, I'm like,
And in a
because
judgmental way.
not, no, like in a curious way. I'm
Okay.
like, I, the, like someone, but again, if you've never spoken, you've never had anyone challenge these ideas. And I'm like, when they act, like the minute that the question is asked, you realize that whatever answer you give is gonna be a little crazy. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's in the speaking that you actually begin to look at these experiences, right? So, and I'll give you an example of living openly. I have now a close friend of mine that I met through Talking Trees that's been following me for a long time, and she told me this experience last year. She's been with me for at least 5 years, a little bit more, and she had a baby. So the baby's like in infancy, just getting playground age last year. So she's at the playground with her small child, and she emailed me. She said for the first time, because she's living openly, she's at the playground with her child for the first time, her third child. For the first time she's at the playground, she sees ants. Now, what typically happens, and somehow ants is part of her narrative of being a survivor, and so it's really triggering for her to see ants. So what has happened in the past is that she sees these ants, has this experience, like me buying gifts for violators, and of course we don't address it then, and then the rest of our world is just discombobulated, and no one knows why.
Right.
She said for the first time ever, she saw the ants. She picked up her son. She looked at the person near her and said, "I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. Ants are very triggering to me. I have to leave." That's it. Because when you drop the secret and you don't have to figure out and make an excuse for why you're leaving and, well, how am I going to say it? When you just drop the secret and live your life however it unfolds, there's so much more freedom in that. Instead of trying to figure out how am I going to get out of this space, and you can't, and all this stuff is going on in your head, you just drop the secret. You don't have to tell anyone what happened, when, and how long, and how many. You don't have to go into all that.
And you can even tell yourself. You don't even have to say it, right? You can say,
That's
this is a trigger for
right.
me.
Right.
So, and I know why, and let's move.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're doing an amazing work, amazing work. And you know
Thank
that's so much
you.
on my heart. So you mentioned that this occurred in 2010, was it? 2010, where this shift occurred?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
What were you doing before?
So I am still a college professor. My PhD is in psychology. I teach psychology, I'm currently at the University of Colorado Springs, teaching in the Department of Counseling and Human Services. And so I'm still in academics because they pay my bills. All of the work that I have done for Talking Trees have been free. I intentionally try to make sure that my resources are free or in low cost. I think the most I've ever charged was $30 for the annual conference because I had to pay for something. I just always believe that survivors have paid enough. So that won't be the case. That's not the case for when I speak. So don't call me up and ask me to speak
No.
for free. Don't do that. Don't do
No,
that.
we're not going to do that.
But it's critical that that in my work that I have always made knowledge accessible, because when people have knowledge, the world is a better place. Right. So anyway, so I started out as a drug and alcohol addictions counselor in the early 80s. So I've been working in this field for a long, long time. I actually earned my master's degree at SUNY Brockport at 22. I was 22 years old. So I've been in this field for a long, long time, in various capacities. And so I'm moving away from the teaching. I finished teaching in May, and then I'll just be doing speaking and continue to speak and write and support survivors in ways that I can, but also looking for larger platforms, because what I realized over the last few years since writing my book, and one of the purposes in writing my book was to have a larger platform, because I realized as survivors begin to speak, we have to also prepare people to listen. And so my goal moving forward is continuing to build up our listening audiences. Doctors, are you listening? You can't just have people come in your office and put your hands all over them wherever you want. Consent matters, even in physical, even in professional medical spaces. Yeah. Right. This matters to the 60 million adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. You know, teachers, lawyers, people, deal with your own stuff so that you're not displacing your own unresolved issues on the people that you're supposed to serve.
Right, and understand that you could trigger someone, not knowing that you're doing that, and not responding to that, but being very understanding, I suppose.
So we need two things to happen. Survivors have started have started speaking. We have to stop just simply patting survivors on the back and saying, good job, good for you. We have to start creating environments that allow them to heal. Because nothing magical happens just because someone says, I'm an incest survivor. Nothing magical happens. There's a whole process that has to unfold. What happens after that? And in fact, the research shows that the most significant task that has to happen is not just that there has to be words spoken, but the affirmation has to happen. So as long as if survivors just say, hey, I'm a survivor, and someone says, good job, shame on, or shame on you, it doesn't matter. What matters most is the feedback that they get. And we see that in the research when children tell and when adults disclose. What matters most is how that message has been received.
Right.
So we have to train people to hear it.
Right, and that's extremely important. Now, we have to close out, but so what's some advice you can give our listeners, our viewers? They're hearing this, and they may be moved to do something. What's the best thing they can do?
Find Talking Trees Survivors.com. There are questions on there. There are Q&A questions on there, and other resources that you can access. And then don't be ashamed to ask for help and seek therapy. I do not do one-on-one counseling, because again, I'm trying to create resources instead. But there are counselors out there, and find one that helps you. And if they don't stick with them.
Yes, some people will stick with people that don't help them. And so that's important.
Right. Yeah. But be intentional. My advice is to be intentional. Right. Be very intentional in your healing journey. None of this stuff will ever clean itself up. No one can love you enough to make it go away. You can't, and trust me, I've tried all of these. You can't be pretty enough, fit enough. Like, it's not going to go away. Be intentional, because you deserve it. Right. Know that you deserve to live well, not just survive.
And that you have it in you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Sometimes we feel like, I can't do this.
Right.
But I really appreciate this conversation. It's much needed. I know that it has activated many hearts today. Thank you for all you do, for all those people who need to hear this. So thank you.
Appreciate you.
Awesome.